The Trump era was marked by a series of audacious political maneuvers that triggered seismic shifts on the world stage. From trade skirmishes to confrontations with allies, the administration's strategy reshaped the international landscape. In response to the recent escalation of tariffs on Chinese goods by the United States, China retaliated, deepening a trade war that, since its inception, has profoundly impacted the global economy. This economic conflict, unfolding over several years, has wreaked havoc on supply chains, sown discord across various sectors, and triggered instability in financial markets, compelling governments and businesses to adapt to a new reality. Retaliatory measures were enacted in response to the actions of the American side, including increased tariffs on certain agricultural products, tighter controls on the trading operations of several American companies, and a temporary suspension of imports on specific goods. To understand the reasons behind this, it is worth examining the background and timeline of the escalating trade relations. The starting point was Executive Order No. 14195, signed by President Donald Trump on February 1, 2025, which imposed a 10% tariff on all imports from China, effective from February 4, 2025. This move was part of a comprehensive strategy aimed at correcting trade imbalances and supporting domestic manufacturers. Despite acknowledging the potential inconvenience for American consumers, the president emphasized the necessity of these measures, stating that they were justified. In response, China imposed 15% duties on imports of coal and liquefied natural gas from the U.S., as well as 10% duties on oil and agricultural machinery starting on February 10, 2025. The escalation of the conflict continued on March 3, 2025, when the Trump administration decided to increase tariffs on Chinese goods from 10% to 20%. The Trump administration, seeking to intensify pressure on China, took this step to compel Beijing to address Washington's concerns regarding trade policies and intellectual property protection. President Trump justified the escalation by citing the need to protect American industry and reduce the trade deficit with China, asserting that tariffs were a vital tool for achieving these goals. In response to the increase in American tariffs, China announced on March 4, 2025, the imposition of additional duties on a wide range of agricultural products from the U.S., effective from March 10, 2025. These measures included a 15% tariff on American chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton. Additionally, 10% tariffs were imposed on American sorghum, soybeans, pork, beef, aquatic products, fruits, vegetables, and dairy products. Besides the imposition of tariffs, China has recently taken a series of measures that directly affect the operations of American companies within its borders. In response to the actions of the U.S., the Chinese Ministry of Commerce took a decisive step by adding 10 American companies to a list of unreliable entities. This move entails significant restrictions for the blacklisted firms. The list includes Act 1 Federal, Cubic Corporation, Exova Huntington, and others representing various sectors of the economy. Such a measure could result in a de facto ban on conducting business in China, denying them access to Chinese investments and sales markets. In addition, Chinese authorities have expanded the list of export controls, including 15 more American companies specializing in defense technologies. This decision significantly restricts the export of dual-use goods, thereby cutting off access to Chinese technologies and markets, which could seriously affect their competitiveness. In addition to the aforementioned measures, China has suspended imports of American timber, citing environmental concerns, and revoked import licenses for soybeans for 3 American companies, including CHS Inc. and Louis Fuss Company Grains Merchandising LLC. These actions, ostensibly motivated by pollution issues, deal a tangible blow to American agricultural exporters. In this geopolitical game, China is playing a multi-layered strategy, seeking to secure its food supply and reduce dependence on American supplies. This strategy, like that of an experienced strategist, is aimed at diversifying food sources and strengthening the domestic agricultural sector. A targeted blow is being delivered to American agricultural exports, the very industry that has already felt the bitterness of past trade battles. By imposing duties on key products such as soybeans, pork, and beef, China is putting pressure on American farmers whose voices carry weight in political circles. But this is only part of the picture. The inclusion of major U.S. corporations on lists of untrustworthy entities and export controls sends a clear signal of China's intent to challenge U.S. economic interests on a broader scale. Chinese officials, with an air of confidence, declare their readiness to manage escalating trade tensions, emphasizing the government's possession of the necessary tools and fiscal resilience to address any emerging challenges. The influential finance minister, Lan Fan, has assured the public that the central government has ample fiscal levers to offset both domestic economic challenges and external turbulence stemming from trade disputes. This involves meticulously crafted plans for controlled increases in the budget deficit and the issuance of targeted treasury bonds designed to inject new life into economic activity. These strategic moves aim to bolster domestic demand, akin to constructing a robust foundation, and to support key industries that serve as engines of progress. In doing so, the country seeks to cushion external blows and maintain the stability of its economic system. Despite the precarious ground of uncertainty caused by trade tensions, China has declared its ambitious goal of achieving approximately 5% GDP growth by 2025. Premier Li Qiang, speaking at the National People's Congress, acknowledged the complexity and volatility of the international environment, yet reaffirmed the government's unwavering determination to achieve its stated objective. Active fiscal policies and targeted efforts to stimulate domestic consumption are viewed as key instruments for achieving the stated growth. In response to increasing external pressure, including trade restrictions, China is transitioning to a strategy of technological self-sufficiency, seeing it as a guarantee of economic independence and sustainable development in an era of global instability. The country's authorities are directing significant resources towards the development of science and technology with an emphasis on artificial intelligence and high-tech manufacturing. This strategy aims to reduce dependence on foreign developments and strengthen the state's role in the global economy. Amidst escalating international tensions, the government has announced a 7.2% increase in the defense budget, signaling a commitment to strengthening not only the economy but also its military capabilities. Tensions between China and the United States, which predated the Trump administration, continue to escalate. In response to U.S. actions restricting China's access to advanced semiconductor technologies, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce imposed export controls on a range of strategically important materials, including gallium, germanium, antimony, superhard materials, and stricter rules for exporting graphite on December 3, 2024. This move mirrored the sanction pressure from Washington. New export restrictions have been introduced, targeting dual-use goods that could have military applications, effectively closing off their supply to the United States. Simultaneously, China is tightening control over the end users and intended use of graphite, a material critical for the production of electric vehicle batteries and a wide range of industrial applications. These steps responded to the U.S. government's actions on December 2, 2024, when export controls were expanded to prevent China's access to semiconductor manufacturing equipment and advanced memory chips. More than 140 Chinese companies were affected. The materials subject to restrictions play a key role in global technology chains. Gallium, for example, is an indispensable component of semiconductors and high-performance electronics. Germanium, in turn, is essential for the production of fiber optics, infrared optics, and other high-tech devices. Antimony, a metalloid widely used in flame retardants and the military industry, has also been restricted. Superhard materials, such as synthetic diamonds and cubic boron nitride, which are crucial for precision cutting tools and protective coatings, have also been affected by the new rules. In today's world, where technology is developing at a dizzying pace, graphite, a key component of lithium-ion batteries, is coming under close scrutiny from export regulators. This move is particularly significant given China's leading role in the production of the strategically important material. The People's Republic of China not only dominates but effectively controls a significant portion of the global market for critical resources. Approximately 98% of the world's gallium supply comes from China, and the country is also a leading producer of germanium. China accounts for almost half of global antimony production and dominates graphite manufacturing, providing over 77% of natural and over 95% of synthetic graphite. The United States, heavily reliant on imports of these materials, could face significant challenges. New restrictions could disrupt key industries such as semiconductors, defense, and renewable energy. Growing trade tensions between the U.S. and China raise serious concerns about potential disruptions to global supply chains and increased inflationary pressures. Analysts warn that higher tariffs could increase costs for consumers and businesses worldwide, potentially slowing global economic growth. The implementation of tariff barriers and other restrictions in international trade creates shaky ground for global maritime transport, which cannot but affect the stability of logistics chains. Companies face a difficult choice, whether to move production from China, facing a labyrinth of regulations and rising costs. Such uncertainty becomes a serious obstacle to effective planning and investment, threatening delays or even complete cancellation of promising projects. The introduction of tariffs on imports from key partner countries inevitably leads to higher prices for a wide range of goods, from high-tech electronics to everyday products. This additional burden of costs is usually passed on to consumers, fueling inflationary pressure. Analysts warn that consumers may feel an immediate spike in prices for products with a short shelf life, while the long-term consequences for the economy remain uncertain. A like under a publication opens the way to a wider audience, and a detailed comment can multiply this effect. Trade wars have a tangible impact on global economic growth rates. In particular, the International Monetary Fund's April 2019 World Economic Outlook report recorded a decline. The forecast for global economic growth in 2019 was revised down to 3.3% from 3.6% expected a year earlier. Economic and trade disputes are highlighted as factors holding back growth and weakening investment. Between 2015 and 2017, trade between China and the United States grew steadily. In 2015, total trade reached $598 billion. U.S. exports to China totaled $116 billion, while imports from China to the U.S. totaled $482 billion, creating a trade deficit of $366 billion. By 2017, economic engagement between the two giants had reached an impressive $635 billion. Exports from China totaled $130 billion, while imports reached $55 billion, resulting in a substantial trade deficit of $375 billion. During this period, China began an ambitious transformation of its economic model. The strategic course was aimed at reducing dependence on exports and stimulating domestic demand, as well as developing the service sector. This maneuver, designed to ensure more sustainable and balanced growth, led to some slowdown in export expansion. Nevertheless, total trade between the U.S. and China remained very significant, reflecting the deep interdependence of the two economies. The structure of trade between the two countries in these years was characterized by a clear specialization. U.S. exports to China relied on key items such as soybeans, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, industrial equipment, and crude oil. In turn, imports from China to the U.S. were represented by a wide range of goods, including electronics, machinery, furniture, bedding, toys, and sporting goods. Between 2018 and 2019, the world witnessed a steady increase in tensions on the trade fronts. The starting point was the United States' decision to impose duties on goods imported from China. Concerns about intellectual property theft and the significant imbalance in trade relations between the two countries were cited as justification for this step. Beijing's response was not long in coming, with its own tariffs targeting American agricultural products and other key export items. This escalation, developing on a tit-for-tat basis, led to increased costs for companies and consumers, causing serious disruptions to global supply chains. As a result of these actions, U.S. exports to China fell to $120 billion. Conversely, imports saw a slight increase, reaching $540 billion, which widened the trade deficit to $420 billion. By 2019, U.S. exports had fallen even further, dropping to $16 billion. Imports also decreased to $452 billion, slightly reducing the deficit to $346 billion. Despite the ongoing trade disputes, certain products continue to dominate trade between the world's two largest economies. Soybeans, once a leading U.S. export to China, saw a significant decline due to mutual tariff wars. However, aircraft and aircraft parts, primarily manufactured by companies like Boeing, remained a key U.S. export, along with automobiles and automotive parts. Semiconductors and electronic components, including integrated circuits, continued to play a vital role in trade, fueling China's insatiable electronics industry. Electronics dominated imports, representing the bulk of Chinese goods flowing into America. Computers, mobile phones, and a variety of household appliances arrived in a never-ending stream from China. Various types of machinery, both industrial and electrical, also constituted a significant portion of imports, confirming China's status as the world's factory. Furniture, bedding, toys, and sporting goods completed the picture, further underscoring China's dominance in the production of consumer goods. In January 2020, the United States and China concluded a Phase 1 trade agreement, which stipulated an increase in Chinese purchases of American goods and services worth a substantial $200 billion over 2 years. However, the COVID-19 pandemic, which soon followed, significantly disrupted global trade flows, preventing China from fully meeting its commitments. The global economic downturn caused by the pandemic negatively impacted production processes, consumer demand, and international trade in general. Both countries faced economic difficulties, which inevitably affected bilateral trade volumes. U.S. exports to China amounted to $124.5 billion, while Chinese imports into the U.S. reached $435.110 billion. The period from 2021 to 2023 saw a partial recovery in trade relations. The Joe Biden administration, while maintaining some of the previously imposed tariffs, emphasized multilateral approaches and initiatives aimed at ensuring the resilience of supply chains. In particular, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPF, was launched to counter China's growing influence in the region. Gradually, trade volumes between the two countries began to recover. In 2021, U.S. exports to China increased to $51.1 billion, while imports rose to $56.4 billion, increasing the trade deficit to $355.00 billion. In 2022, global exports saw a slight decline, reaching $149.4 billion. Imports, on the other hand, showed an impressive volume of $536.9 billion and then reached $550.3 billion. This imbalance led to a deficit of $42.6 billion. However, the situation changed in 2024. Renewed tensions in trade relations between the countries led to noticeable political shifts. Exports from the U.S. to China decreased by 2.9%, falling to $143.5 billion. At the same time, imports of Chinese goods into the U.S. increased by 2.8%, reaching $438 billion. As a result, the trade deficit between the two countries amounted to a substantial $295.4 billion. The trend continued in 2025. As of January, U.S. exports to China amounted to $9.9 billion, while imports from China reached $41.6 billion. Thus, the monthly trade deficit was $31.7 billion. It is clear that current trade policies and the geopolitical environment continue to have a significant impact on trade relations between the world's two largest economies. With Donald Trump's return to the presidency in January, his administration has resumed its aggressive trade policy. Tariffs are being reintroduced on various countries, and the list is scheduled to expand in April. These steps will undoubtedly have a further impact on global trade and economic relations between nations. Observers are noting a worrying similarity between the current rhetoric and the events of the first presidential term, when a trade war was unleashed, destabilizing global markets and significantly impacting the United States economy. History teaches us that repeating such a strategy could lead to even more significant economic upheaval. Previously, tariff barriers were erected against China, the European Union, Canada, Mexico, and other key trading partners. Initially, these measures were presented as protecting American industry and leveling the trade balance. However, as expected, they provoked a response from the affected states. This culminated in 2018 when a full-scale trade war with China broke out. Both countries imposed mutual duties on goods worth hundreds of billions of dollars. As a result, American companies and consumers faced increased costs. A study published in the reputable Quarterly Journal of Economics revealed that American consumers and firms lost $51 billion due to the tariffs imposed, with real income losses amounting to $7.2 billion. The severity of these measures was primarily felt by American importers and consumers. Import duties triggered a rise in prices for a wide range of goods, from electronics to cars, directly hitting citizens' wallets. The trade war turned out to be a real disaster for employment and economic growth. Analysts at Moody's Analytics estimated in 2019 that tariffs cost the U.S. economy about 300,000 jobs, especially in the manufacturing sector as well as in housing construction and retail. A study by Oxford Economics and the U.S.-China Business Council later showed that by 2021, the states had lost approximately 245,000 jobs due to trade tensions. The manufacturing sector, which the Trump administration sought to revive with tariffs, was particularly hard hit. Companies faced a sharp increase in the cost of raw materials and semi-finished products, undermining their competitiveness. It is worth noting that the tariffs did not achieve the stated goal of reducing the U.S. trade deficit. On the contrary, the overall goods deficit increased by 21% since 2016, reaching record levels. Businesses began looking for alternative suppliers in other countries instead of returning production to the United States as planned. A new tariff wave looming in the event of Trump's return threatens to be even more devastating. The global economy barely recovered from the inflationary shock, supply disruptions, and geopolitical storms may once again falter under the burden of new duties. Prices for American consumers will skyrocket, economic growth will slow down, and unemployment will rear its head again. As past experience shows, the brunt of the tariff burden will once again fall on the shoulders of American businesses, while international markets will be flexible and find workarounds. Instead of strengthening the American economy, escalating the trade war threatens to deepen internal instability and alienate key allies and trading partners. These are the possible consequences, but what do you think? Share your opinion in the comments. On this note, we conclude our broadcast. Thank you for your attention and participation. If you found our materials useful or interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with new publications. Viewer support is the main value for any author. As a token of appreciation, we invite you to check out another interesting video that is now displayed on the screen. Perhaps it will open new horizons and provide food